Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this CaseWare webinar where we're going to be looking at defined benefit pension schemes and how we're going to use those in CaseWare. Now, today's webinar is going to be looking at the functionality within the notes and what tools you've got available to you. And I'm going to be here today organising, and my colleague Jack, who's an education and media consultant, he's going to be running you through the steps and giving you the inside knowledge around defined benefit pension schemes, when they're going to pop up, and how you're going to handle that within the CaseWare environment. Okay, so to help us with that today, what we've got is Jack, would you mind moving on to the next slide? Perfect, thank you. If you do have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to use the GoToWebinar app or the panel on the right hand side of your screen. We will be fielding questions within a Q&A section, and hand raising is welcome. If you want to unmute yourself at any stage within the Q&A, we can unmute you and you can ask a question directly to Jack if you want to, or you can just simply go through and put your question in the question field, send it across to me, and I'll raise that with Jack at the end of the session. Okay, now the Q&A session, the recording of this webinar will all be made available on the CaseWare knowledge base. For the ones of you who don't have access to CaseWare knowledge base, I recommend you sign up. If not, you can always go to a CaseWare YouTube channel where you'll be able to view that recording there. All right then, so let's take a look at the agenda, and welcome Jack into the webinar as well.
Hi guys, you all right?
All right, Jack.
How are you?
All right. So Jack, the agenda's on the screen, so everyone can see that now. To see what you'll be covering, is there anything you want to add quickly before we start delving into the content?
Yeah, so I think we're going to run through, as the agenda says, we're going to run through the introduction. We're just going to talk a little bit about defined benefit pension schemes and what they are, why they're changing a little bit in the way that everyone's using them at the moment, and a little bit more on the background of them. We'll jump into the mapping as we spoke about. We'll go through the trial balance and make sure that we're clear on the different mapping codes in there and what everyone is doing on there. The other thing that we're going to look at is in Note Builder. We're going to start looking at some of the Note Builder notes when we're populating and editing those notes. We're going to jump through and look a little bit at Note Builder. We won't go too much into Note Builder today, as we're not on a Note Builder webinar, and there's plenty of those on the knowledge base if you want to go and have a look. But we'll show you how they can be used around the DB pension schemes and what is needed to consider when you're going through those different options there.
Super. So yeah, we've got a CaseWare note which you're going to follow through. So the Note Builder side is for going to be those cases where you're falling outside the scope of the case, where it's the standard note, and you've got maybe multiple entities that you want to implement changes on. So in that point where we can look at the customization, so it's hopefully that will give everyone a little bit of insight on how to use the Note Builder tool as well. So Jack, let's go through the intro, and I'll head over just to looking at questions. So see you guys.
Perfect. Cheers, Tony. So yes, we'll jump into the next slide now, just talk a little bit more about the background of DB schemes and how that's all working there. So we've got defined benefits pension scheme. We appreciate that there's a few of you on here that may be slightly new to defined benefits pension schemes. So this slide here, just to run through some of the background and things that have changed. If you go back sort of 20, 30 years, defined benefits pension schemes were a lot more common. Okay, you had firms like Debenhams, BHS were running defined benefits pension schemes, but due to the aging of the population, defined benefits pension schemes are now a lot more expensive to run. Okay, now a lot of you nowadays will have come across defined contribution pension schemes. Now, defined contribution pension schemes, you get where each month, defined contribution being the key word, the employee is putting a set amount into that pension plan, and that can be matched by the employer. Okay, with a defined benefit pension scheme, that pension scheme, the benefit when they get to the end of their time of working is what is going to be the payout at the end of that scheme, whereas the payout in a defined contribution scheme isn't known until later. So that defined benefit pension scheme then is valued each year, which is a lot more complex in terms of accounting. But as I said, as the population is getting older, particularly with firms like BHS and Debenhams, it means that those schemes are so expensive to run that it can actually collapse the entire company, as we saw in those two cases. They couldn't afford to keep paying out those defined benefits, which had been set up for the employees, and it unfortunately is causing a lot of firms to collapse. So recently, there's been a big shift away from DB schemes and to DC schemes because the cost is known and it's certain to the company, and the benefit at the end of it is a little bit less predictable. Okay. But obviously, defined benefit schemes are still existing. That's why we're on this webinar. Defined benefits pension schemes still exist in lots of different companies. We come across them relatively often, so it's not like they don't exist at all. But as I said, the accounting within that area is slightly more complex. Okay, so the accounting within defined benefits pension schemes, you're going to get some reports from actuaries there, because they're going to have lots of different plan assets, the plan liabilities. The liabilities of a plan obviously depend on who's left in that plan, and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot is going to be used in that respect. Okay. Just before I jump into the CaseWare files, I just want to show you a screenshot of the sort of base pension scripters note here for the defined benefit pension scheme. Now, we're going to look at all of these things today on the right-hand side, but that note on the left-hand side is just the first shot you see of the pension commitments note when you've got the defined benefits scheme chosen. Okay, and in there you can insert rows, you can customize calculation cells. There's lots of different things we can do in there, which we're going to run through later on in the webinar. Show you a lot of the customization, particularly within that note itself. Okay, because it's a specialized note, there's a lot of detail that's gone in there. The template's got a lot of information. You can go in and you can see that in there. All right, so I'm just going to pause my screen there while I open up the CaseWare file. And I'm going to jump into the CaseWare file here. So what we've got here is a trial balance that's from one of our trading datas. With the idea from what we've tried to simulate here is this is what you might be looking at in terms of, you've got some brought forward pensioning liabilities in the file. There might have been some past service costs in that file. Okay, and we've jumped in here and you can see that the plan in the TB, you've got some opening pension liabilities that are already there. Okay, and we can see the reserves brought forward, and that's already been affected there as well. So this is sort of the typical state in which you would find sort of an ongoing client year on year. They've sent you the trial balance with the opening pension liabilities in there. Okay. Now, as we go through the example today, I'm going to jump in a moment and we're going to look at some of the journals that you can add in there for this. What's actually really useful, and I think we'll bring it up now, is there is on the knowledge base, there is a really good article, article 1592, where you've got all of the pension schemes mappings codes here. Okay. Now, what this article is really, really good at is it's got a list of every single thing that CaseWare's got in the templates. Okay, this is looking at the liabilities in the pension schemes under the F2001 sections, and I'll jump into the mapping a little bit more in a moment. But it's got all of these different map codes in here, okay, with all of the different potential costs you could get in a pension scheme. And then at the bottom, it's got this really, really helpful journal section here, okay, and that is really useful for understanding if you have picked up a file for the first time and you have got to enter an opening pension liability, for example. You can go in and do that. And this article here on knowledge base is really helpful for helping with the accounting side of it, as well as the CaseWare side of how things are all working. Okay, so this article is really useful to get on, have a look at, and sort of have to hand. Now you'll notice actually as we go through the webinar today that article is the information that's in it is used in quite a few different places. Okay, which is really useful to have handy, but we'll show you that as we go through. But it's worth pointing out at this stage that that's there for you guys. And if you want to be added to the knowledge base and you're not on the knowledge base already, then if you want to drop a link, Tony and I will review the list after the session. If you just put a comment in there, we can get you signed up to the knowledge base to make sure you're included in that. Okay. So I'll jump back in to the CaseWare file in our new file here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say, right, we've got let's say there's a current service cost that's coming in to here. Okay. We can see that this is going to affect our TB. We've had the actuarial report. The actuarial report is where you're going to get all of this information. So it's actually quite important to point out that you will get an actuarial report which will spell out most of this stuff for you guys, unless you are actuaries yourselves. But there will be these figures given to you rather than you having to sort of work these figures out. Okay, they should come with the pension plan that you've got. Now, like I say, if we're going to look at the current service cost, okay, I'm just going to do a quick journal, and then I'll jump into a little bit more on the mapping and everything back in our slides. So if I jump in to the adjusting entries, okay, and then we're going to click on a new journal here. I'm just going to do as we always would, current service cost. Okay, and we can see again from the guidance, we can pick it up from here. We've got the current service cost, which really nicely points out to us, right, if you've got a current service cost using this article, Journal 2 in this example, current service cost is going to be to one of those map codes there and to that map code there. Now, just to make it a little easier for today, for the purpose of the webinar, I've actually, for the pensions files, we've made the account numbers the same as the map numbers to make it a little bit clearer on what we're trying to achieve. So I'm just going to drop down here, quickly drop in current service cost, okay, F20, right? And the other side of that journal is going to be down in, we've got PQR, current service cost of pensions, all right? And that's all there for you. Now, again, that guidance is really useful. If you're confused about what appears where, we can see debits appearing in the costs, as we'd expect, debits appearing in the expenses side of the P&L, and then the liabilities being created in the plan liabilities. Okay, so I'll jump back in here again, and then we've got, let's pick 25,000 a day, okay, and that's then added into there. Okay, once that's there, that's now in the journal, and that's then going to be in the TB. Okay, but that's just a good example for you guys of how that extra sheet there can be really useful, and it can be really handy. Like I said, using that guidance, it's very, very useful to have available and on hand when you're doing this stuff. Okay, so that's the journal I'm going to show. I'm going to jump into it, and you might have seen the files that we've got set up, Blue Peter style. We're going to jump into some different files in a moment. We've got a corporate file, and we're going to look a little bit at the charity file later on to show you how the funds work. But the next thing I'm just going to do is I'm just going to jump back into the slides, because we've got a couple of slides just to show you a little bit more about how the mappings and some of the key mappings work in there. Okay, so this slide here, the key mappings and the key sections, if you like, within the pensions and defined benefit pensions, particularly areas. Okay, you've got the F20 section. Now that's where you're going to get all of the pension liabilities and the pension assets. Okay, and they're divided slightly further in when you go into the .01 codes and the .11 codes. Okay, and that makes sure that everything's organized as the mapping is in CaseWare, as we all know. So it's all organized in there. You can see what you need to see, okay, and you can clearly access what's going to happen in those particular areas. All right. You've then got the pensions reserves, okay, in HO3.11, and that again is where you're going to be taking, the pensions reserves brought forward. Any movements in the year are going to go down there, okay, and that's where you're going to find all those codes. And then finally, the .82 codes in the P&L side. Now, it differs slightly for the corporate template, and I know we've got people on here from both today, so it differs slightly on the corporate template, but the corporate template can either be cost of sales or your admin costs or distribution costs, anything like that. And where it ends in .82, sorry, where the second set of digits are .82, that's where you're going to find all of your pensions costs. Okay. Now we'll talk about the funds worksheet a little bit more in a few moments, but again, for charities, that's slightly different because of the way the costs are there. Okay, and for them, you're looking at the U or Y codes, but again, for the P&L side, it's always going to be .82. Okay, and that's really, really key to get there when you're looking at these. As I said, particularly for funds, as we'll see in a minute in the funds worksheet, everything comes back to .82 when it comes to pensions. Okay. I'm just going to very quickly jump in. I won't spend too much time on these next couple of slides, but just to give you a little bit more detail on what's here. The pension liabilities, this is again looking at the majority of pensions. You're going to have some of these things in there. So you're going to have current service costs, past service costs. It's going to change the pension liabilities. And again, those numbers will probably be given to you, particularly where you look at things like actuarial gains and losses. Okay, that's definitely going to come in as a cost that you guys are going to be given. And it's a very similar thing on the asset side. So you're going to have, again, pension assets and how that's affected by current service costs, past service costs, actuarial gains and losses, etc. again. Okay. And that's going to be given to you there. All right. So the next thing I'm going to jump into is the funds worksheet, and then we're actually going to get into the note itself and how that's all turned on. So what I will do is if I open up the funds worksheet here. Sorry, Tony.
To jump in, Jack.
Yeah. No,
sorry to jump in. The question here is regarding the mapping side. Being new to CaseWare, not familiar with the mappings, is there any place within the files themselves where we can get access to the mapping information for academies and charities?
For academies and charities, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the funds worksheet in academies and charities is where, if I just unpause my screen quickly, the funds worksheet here is going to be, this is going to be your bread and butter when it comes to all the mapping, and we'll run through this in a few moments. In terms of, sorry, Tony, just to clarify on the question, is it where people, they want more general guidance for charities and academies?
No,
it
was just
for pensions?
Just where we could find some of the mapping guidelines for charities and academies within the file. So just the information, I'd imagine I'm sure they're referring to what you had on screen there a moment ago.
On the PowerPoint slide, sorry.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, for when you're looking at the EF codes there. Is there any place within the file where we can get that mapping guidelines and guidance?
So with regards to the pensions, yes, there's the pensions guidance where there are a few different spots within the file where you've got the question mark boxes and I boxes that pop up that can give you further guidance within the charities file on the pension stuff. For a more general charities, the mappings guidelines, you're probably better off if you look at the actual mappings codes themselves in the charities file. So if you go to assign mappings in the assign mapping screen, you'll get there the whole list of different map codes that you can get within the charities template there. If that answers the question, and please tell me if it doesn't.
I think it's more referring just to specific for the pension side. We've got the wizard options, haven't we? So when we're selecting the defined benefit pensions, and then we've got the information button. I think that might be. I think that together with what you said there with the assign mapping screen.
Completely. Sorry, no. If it's more referring to the pension side, then if I jump into the charities file in here, and I jump into the wizard, obviously the way you've worked through the wizard in accounts format, when you tell CaseWare that there is a defined benefits pension scheme in there, then you've got this button here for more guidance on the mapping within defined benefits pension schemes, and that is where you're going to find this information here. Okay, and this will give you a nice breakdown, and particularly within the SOPA section, because we're in the charities file now, this will then make it really clear on within the SOPA section. It's looking at the .82 particularly, as we can see there. Okay, and it's got all of those different bits of information within the file itself. So no spot on, Tony. You can go in there and we can find these certain bits. It's also got a little bit more detail, as you can see here. If I can make this a bit bigger, I can't on this screen. But you can see that it's got those journals, similar to the guidance that we had on the knowledge base. It's got guidance for the charities specifically embedded in the file here. So hopefully that's useful for people that have got that question, if that's all right.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jack.
Perfect. Great. So from there, what I'll do is, as we're in the charities file, I'll carry on in the funds sheet here. So where you've got pensions reserves being dropped in to the charities file, okay, obviously that's going to be applicable to either the unrestricted funds or the restricted funds, okay. Now with the pension income lost or loss, we can see here at the moment, if you tell CaseWare everything is unrestricted, it will take everything to the unrestricted funds. If you tell CaseWare everything is restricted, it will take it to the restricted funds, okay? And if you have got a split of both, CaseWare will then give you the option here to type in, and then it will automatically split the costs for you based on the total then being what's in the TB, okay? Now, in terms of the .82s, again, as we come down, every single section in here is going to be referring to, at a point, the .82 codes, and that's where you've got your pensions costs. Okay, so this is where you're going to be putting it in whichever the relevant activity or fund is. You're going to be coming down, and all these lists have got the same. You've got .82 again. Okay, I won't do too many because you guys will get the point pretty quick. But .82 is where it's looking for you to split these costs across those different sections within the charity file. Okay, .82 again down here for supporting costs. All right. So just be really clear there that the .82, whether it be the Y section there or whether it be to do with the corporate costs, with the admin costs or cost of sales, it's all going to go to those .82 codes where the pension costs lie. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to jump into is just very quickly, I mean, we looked at it a little bit there, so I might just jump back on myself. If you do have a DB pension scheme and you haven't yet turned that on, it's found in the accounts format and disclosure format, okay? And this is the same for both the corporate templates and the charities and academies templates. You've got the DB pension schemes at the bottom here, and you just need to tick that box to turn it on, okay? Now what I'm going to do next is a very Blue Peter style. Here's one I made earlier. So I'm going to jump in now. We're going to start having a look at the note itself, okay? And we can then jump in from there. So I'm going to open that up now in here, okay? And when it loads up for me, if I scroll up, this is where we've then got, okay, the CaseWare pensions note for DB schemes as it comes out of the box here, okay? I'm just going to quickly scroll down the note just so you guys can get a little bit of an appreciation of how large it is, and what it's gonna mean for filling all this in. And as you know, these notes are really quite detailed. They're quite complex. There's lots of different disclosures that go into this note. So the template here that's come out is really useful, and it can get everyone most of the way there for the majority of cases, all right? Now, what we're going to look at next is actually going to be to do with how we use this if we want to customize it slightly. So, as Tony said earlier, Note Builder might be applicable for if you've got some, you've got 30 odd entities, okay, in your group, and they've all got to do a DB's pension note, defined benefit pension note. With those 30 entities, if you've got the economies of scale that it's worth building your own note, if there's something that's quite distinctly different from the CaseWare templates, then that might be a more time efficient way to go. But for the majority of cases, we would like to think now that CaseWare notes are the templates are pretty good. They cover the majority, and I'd say the vast majority now of things that can go into these different notes, okay? And where you've got that situation where you need to tweak it ever so slightly, there's obviously the ability to edit rows and add new rows, which we spoke about on that slide earlier on, and what we'll go through today to go through this, Okay. So the pension commitments note, okay, at the top you've got these question mark boxes, okay, and where you click on these question marks, there are a few different options that you've got available. Now, at the minute, we've obviously told CaseWare that we've got the DB scheme, but if you did have a defined contribution scheme, you could tick that box and that would turn on those things there. Okay, if I click that now, you'll see that anything that's going to be there is now warning me this company operates a defined contribution scheme, and if I do that, it will remove all of the bits and pieces that are relevant there. Okay.
Right, Jay. So if we did have, if you did have a scheme there for a DB scheme and a defined contribution scheme, is that just indicates that warning is linked to the mapping in the file?
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, you can obviously have both. It's possible to have both a defined contribution scheme and a defined benefit scheme. And where that is the case, you obviously need to disclose both, and that mapping would change. The defined contribution scheme, the costs would go towards wages and salaries again in the .82 section, but you wouldn't have these plan assets and plan liabilities, which use the F section codes here, which makes up the majority of this note.
Super. I think we saw earlier as well, we can have up to, is it up to 3 defined benefit pension schemes?
You can, yeah, spot on. Yeah, no, you can have up to 3 defined benefit pension schemes within the mappings. If I jump back to the mappings in here,
but it sounds like you probably wouldn't want to have 3 schemes because it'd be quite complicated, but
it would. Absolutely spot on. But no, the option is there. If you have got 3 different schemes, there are the mappings for .01, .02 and .03 with the corresponding .11, .12, .13. Right, so they are there if people do want to use them. But yes, so sorry Tony, was there any other questions at that point while I've had a sip?
No, that's just me chipping in. I'll get back into the
phone. So you can also have multiple employer schemes where you've got lots of different employers in one pension scheme there, and if that's necessarily there, you can tick that box again, but we won't tick that one today for this purpose. Okay, so CaseWare is going to come in. The company operates defined benefit pension scheme, as you would expect. Now, as we come down the note, okay, you've got the tick boxes for each table, okay, to decide whether this table is relevant for the scheme that you're operating or whether it's relevant for your accounting disclosures. Okay. Now, if you did decide one's not relevant, then you can simply untick the box. All right, and that will just simply skip that table in terms of when this comes onto print preview. Okay. Now, as we come down again, you can see this. There's lots of different sections, as we mentioned before. You've got the reconciliation of fair value plan liabilities, plan assets, okay? And what you might have noticed is there are some sections in here where you've got white cells, okay, which we know we can't go and add. But for the blue cells here, for those of you that use CaseWare for a while, you know that the blue cells are user input cells, but there's already a number populated in that table, okay? Now, the reason for that is that those cells have got a custom calculation in them, but you can also overwrite that custom calculation, okay? So if I take this one as an example, and I jump into the table here, okay? You can see here, we've got this configure cell option available there. And that's also a good tip and a good shortcut for everyone to know that if that cell option is there, and you can click on that cell, that you have got that row configured as a custom calculation row, okay, rather than it being populated by the row configuration. Okay, so if we do then click on this cell, you can see that the template, which is very impressive in this particular area, has got lots of different map codes, okay, that we've got from the TB already populating this section, okay, and that's meant that there's already figures that are coming through here. Okay. Now again, to re-emphasize the point, I could come in and for these blue cells, pick a different one. I could just type over that, all right, and that would then change that cell there, but CaseWare would of course warn me that that's now been overridden. And people might want to have a look at this as they come down to review that someone's overwritten what's come to that cell automatically. Okay.
So Jack, on this side then, you've got the option there to overtype within the blue cells. So
Yeah.
which might be really handy, like on first year setup. So for example, I can notice you don't have the 2019 figures within this file.
Yeah.
So for you could, if it's just first year setup, quite quickly and easily type those into the face of the accounts without having to set up all the journals.
Spot on. Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
But also probably in the current year, if you were to set it up using that journal that you showed us earlier, it probably, again, you could use the journal on the TB top. So you've got the flexibility of the approach. Because I'd imagine for most people, of course, the same as my experience, it's like when I used to get the trial balance, we had lots of information missing on it regarding the pension. So it was a case of waiting for that actuary's statement and typing it in. So from this point, then you can either manually input or link it to the mapping itself.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. Yeah, no, Tony's right. Typically, when there's people are comfortable accounting for the majority of the pension schemes, but they might have some information that comes in the actuarial reports, and that's where you're going to get these things like actuarial gains and losses, which you might need to come in and type in here, or journal it in, depending on which way round you would like to approach the way you want to build the note. But the idea that there's a bit of flexibility in there to allow the users that are building these notes the choice in how they want to build it is quite useful, particularly when you've got some areas like where you add in these sorts of information here with discount rates and mortality rates.
Yeah.
That's obviously
you're never going to get that on TV, are
you? No.
So if you wanted to, again, like to get, this is one of the areas that I would say from, again, back in practice and on calls with clients, this is an area where you've just taken us to where some people may want to be adding in a little bit more detail. I know you mentioned custom notes, yeah, but can we build in more detail into these sections here for future pension increases, etc., etc.?
No, absolutely, yes. So when we're in here, if we want to insert another row in these tables, and I'll show you on two different tables here. I'll show you with this table because it can catch people out, and I'll show you on a numerical table as well. But when you want to insert a row in here, it's exactly the same as it is in other areas of CaseWare, where you've got the insert new row option available to you. All right. Now, when you're there, if you click on custom calc, okay, excuse me, it's me telling it needs a row. Now, what's worth noting is when you come into here, okay, and we click OK, I'll let that come up in here. You may end up with white cells here. Now, the reason for that is that this table here is alphanumeric, okay? And in order to be able to type in that cell, you need that cell to therefore be alphanumeric. So if we jump into row configuration at that point, okay, you've got alpha here in row style or numeric. Now, because it didn't match, it wasn't particularly happy with us there. But if I change that to alpha, you can now see that you can type in those blue cells in there, okay? Row heading could be something like, I've seen CPI rates on a client I've worked with. So CPI rates could come in there, and then you could come in and go, right, 2.3%. Okay, and that then populates that for you. Okay, and that's extra information that you haven't had to go and build a whole new note now. You can put that now in the CaseWare template that's there for you. Just simply by tweaking it with one extra row in there, you can go in and add that information. And like I said, it's the same if I come up to this up here. If there's an area of cost that you've not got automatically being included in here, something weird and wonderful, I'm sure we all see, you can do the same again, and this time we should get the blue cell straight away because we've got a numeric table. But it's just worth noting that that information that I typed in a moment ago, okay, is obviously going to be slightly different because it is alphanumeric, and like I say, that can catch people out. I know it caught me out the first time I saw it, where you've got that situation where you just need to change that cell type in there under row configuration to choose between the two. All right, so hopefully that's useful for people going forward. One of the other things that I wanted to mention, and I'll jump onto Node Builder in a moment, but the things that can come up when you're looking at these custom cells, if I jump into this one here, okay, with custom calculations, is you've got all of these question marks that are appearing in these map codes. All right, now in CaseWare, that's what we refer to as wildcards, okay? And effectively what it's doing is it's saying, right, we're looking at all of the codes that have got .03 in the last 4 digits and a .85 in the second pair of digits, but anything else, and it will add up anything else where it's got those wildcards in there, okay? So just so you guys are aware that when you're building these disclosures and the way that you're populating these cells, is that if you do see these question marks appearing, that is basically like a catch-all. It's going to try and add up everything that meets those criteria, okay, and it's going to bring them into this cell ready to be added up and used in there. All right, so just again to make sure everyone's happy with what those question marks are and the way that's working. So the last thing that I want to jump onto just before we go on to the Q&A, and I'm sure you guys can grill me if you would like to in a moment. I'm just going to jump in with the Node Builder note. So it's just a Node Builder note that is ever so slightly different.
Sorry, Jack. Just
sorry
to jump right in, interrupt you.
No.
That's my job today. Sorry. I just had a question in from one of the people to join the webinar today. It's again, I thought it's a good point to add it in. It's asking, is it possible to insert a custom table into a pension note? For example, where we have 2 or more DB schemes and the notes are shown in aggregate, which they are, but you would like to insert a summary table to show the net pension or asset, or sorry, net pension asset or liability position. So I think this kind of flows into your next section.
Yeah. So I think no, it's a very good timing to chuck that one in. So the answer, if you're going to build a whole new table, we would probably suggest using Note Builder for that. The reason being is that you've got a lot more control about those different sections in there, and we will jump in to that in a second. I'll show you how that works. To build a whole new table from scratch is obviously a little bit more difficult if you're using the CaseWare template. So, but again, I would only go down that route if it's something that you really need to disclose in terms of what you're using the section for. Like I say, Note Builder is a really useful tool, and there'll be plenty of to answer that question, Tony, that came in. There'll be plenty of Note Builder webinars out on the knowledge base, and I would definitely go and have a look at those after these if you're not quite sure on how to use Note Builder. But you can definitely add those extra tables into this pensions note by using Note Builder for that. So I'll tell you what I'll do with our one that I'm going to add today. I'll add in the Note Builder note. So this is just one that we built earlier. Okay, just going into user defined Note Builder note. All right, and I'll drop in this one here. Okay.
Just a quick whilst we're loading this in. Those user defined content that you create in CaseWare, if you're not familiar with CaseWare, you can share between your colleagues. Okay, so if you are setting these up, it's to save time. So make sure that you are sharing them around as well with your colleagues or staff. If you want any information on that, let me know in the chat field or a question, and I'll make sure we get a KB article for you. Back to you, Jack.
No, perfect. So in here, if you did want to make, you've got in this particular Note Builder note, we've got some text. Okay, we've got the table in here, and we've got some more text at the bottom. But if you did want to make this just this table and make it part of that note, and bear in mind, Note Builder notes do appear a little bit strangely in here, but when you get to print preview, they're all fine. If you did want to make this Note Builder note appear as part of that pensions note, then I would just take out the user text box there. Okay, now I've just got that table left. And if you get rid of the number and title here, then it will appear as one continuous note. Okay, and that table would then be included in the DB pensions note. So you've got that available to sort of drop up into there if you like, but it's just taking the time to build that note and include some bits. As I mentioned, this work we had some CPI and RPI ones that were being used that weren't in the table as standard at the moment. I know that they're updating that all the time, so it might be in future. But hopefully that answers the question on how we can get other tables into the pensions note.
Definitely. I think everyone's seen there that I think that's probably a little bit more detailed than what the question was even asking for, but it definitely allows you to see that you can build an analysis table in, and you can define that liability or asset per scheme if you want to, quite quickly and easily. Again, if that's something you're going to be doing regularly and it falls outside the scope of the CaseWare note, then follow Jack's guidance there and get yourself over to Note Builder. Because yeah, it's again quite a nice quick solution. Brilliant, thanks, Jack.
Perfect. All right. Well, look, that's pretty much everything that I was going to go through today. I hope it's been useful for everyone. I know we've got a few of you on here from a few different places, and I know charities as well. Charities works the same way when it comes to the note, so it's just a mapping that's slightly different. But we've got some Q&A time at the end here, so if you want to send in any questions, then do feel free to send them in. And I know there's a few bits that Tony's going to talk about upcoming webinars as well. So thank you guys for listening, and I will speak to you shortly.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jack. And as Jack did mention there, we have got some slides to go through as well. Jack, would you mind just loading that slide back up? Thank you. All right, so as with every other webinar, the webinar today is going to be recorded, okay? And it will be available on the knowledge base. But just to let you know what's upcoming, we've got a new EPAC release. Now, when you see a C and an A at the start of an EPAC, it's relating to charity and academies. So if anyone is on the call today is working on charities and academies, make sure you do take that EPAC or do get to join up to the webinar. There's quite a lot of new content that's going into this release, and it's something that you'd all want to be made aware of. Now, next we've got charity and academy mapping, and then charity and academy funds worksheets. So very charity academy focused month. This content should be up on the events page in the next week, and you'll be available to set up and register to attend. We're also going to be looking at creating quick tips and tricks webinars, where we're going to be setting up as a regular event where we go through and look at top tips within it, a little bit like there where Jack was showing you the cell configuration button rather than going in configuration row, stuff like that to try and save you a few clicks here and there. Okay, so that's what's upcoming. Remember, as I said, all past webinars are all available for you. Again, the events page there is where you can go through and sign up, but as I said, all past ones will be available, all updates from client services, and these will be available on the knowledge base and also through using YouTube and other mediums we use. We're trying to make sure that the content, we can get the content to you quickly and easily. So just quickly, whilst I've got you all here, would there anyone have trouble accessing YouTube through a work environment? Would that be a problematic means of you getting hold of training material from us? We want to make sure it's as regularly as available and easily available as possible. So if that's going to be a problem for you, let me know. With that said, though, that's all the kind of the spill on what's coming and how to get hold of the recorded content. So for now, we have got a few questions that are coming, Jack. So first one that's came in pretty early on. I think you probably already answered it, but not bad as a recap there. Where do you get the content for the pension specific mapping? Where you showed the knowledge base article?
Yeah, I'll share my screen again.
Perfect. I'll put that link in the chat field for everyone as well. So if anyone does want that, take a copy of it. I'll make sure that's available in the Q&A document as well. So that's the corporate one, the corporate mapping. But again, as Jack showed you, you can get the charity and academy specific one available within the template. Yeah. The next question, I'm sorry, I'm rushing through these because I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure everyone gets off to lunch. Including yourself, Jack, obviously. So the other section, does the pension always display on the statement of financial position in or below the liability sections, regardless of whether you have a net pension asset or a net pension liability? Is it possible to show a net pension asset in the asset section? All right, so I think the question there, so if we go up to the balance sheet there, Jack, we'll be able to see, there we go, so scroll down. So There we go. So there's there's a pension asset liability. CaseWare's statement set is set to have pension asset liability on that row, regardless if it is a asset or a liability. Now, Jack, I'm sure will strongly agree with this as well, that we do suggest you stick to the layout as closely as you can do. The more of the automation of the template you can rely on, the better. However, what you can do, and you saw some of the tricks that Jack showed you earlier, is you can insert rows and you can go through and modify calculations. You won't be able to template this. Well, you could create your own whole custom balance sheet, but I don't think you'd want to do that. So you'd have to do that individually on a file by file, and you'd also have to consider any iXBRL tagging requirement that goes along with it as well. But yes, you would be able to go through and you could go up to current assets and insert a row there and post your pension or pension asset there if you really wanted to. You've got the tools there within the software to do that. Okay. So again, if you want more guidance on that, if that's actually a showstopper and you need to get that figure there because either the client wants it or the partner needs it there, then let me know and maybe we can have a chat at the end of the session, or maybe just through email. Okay. There's one more question that's coming as well. Okay, so the question there again is it's a very valid question. I think it's following on from the previous one about showing the asset or liability for separate DB schemes. Questions in: are you able to have a DB pension note duplicated if there are multiple DB schemes rather than having aggregated values? I think, Jack, on that side, that would be using the custom node builder side, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, I think that goes back to the example we had earlier on, where if, as we come down here, if you have got separate tables that you need to show for different schemes, then yeah, the node builder is the best bet for that for the majority of cases. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, super. So again, for the people that have asked those questions, I'd imagine you probably want a little bit more guidance on Node Builder. So we will throw some Node Builder webinars, and as Jack alluded to, there's plenty of content up there. It's all free and available on the knowledge base. So we'll put that in a Q&A document at the end and make sure you've got that access to. So with that said, I think just over by a couple of minutes. It's not too bad. So Jack, do you want to quickly just load the ending slide back up for me? And really just at this stage, just take the opportunity to thank everyone for turning up today. Jack, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure everyone found that useful. And as I said, the recording and the accompanying information, documentation, KB articles, we will make available on the Q&A document with the recording on the knowledge base. So that's it. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good afternoons, and I'll hopefully see you on a CaseWare webinar soon.
Cheers, guys. See you later.
Bye.